Then we involve our human strength. If you look there at verse 23, I'm going back to Galatians. I should have told you to put a marker there. Chapter 4, verse 23. Here's what Paul in this struggle says, but he who was of the bondwoman was born according to the flesh, and he of the free woman through promise. He'll later refer to it as a spiritual situation. See this activity that occurred, especially from the Old Testament perspective, was Abraham's trying to figure out how he's going to do what God has told him he's going to do for him. The struggles that this creates, the tension that it creates, I'm surprised it hadn't been developed. It probably has, and I've missed it in one of the greatest mini-series. Individuals can see this today. God's involved. The wife says, go ahead and have a child by my handmaid. That child is born, what happens? Sarah's just so happy. Thrilled for her husband and the new wife and the new child. You know better. You know better that's not the way it's going to work. She should have known better. You know why we should know better? Anytime we decide to change the rules and do things our way instead of God's way, we mess up, and it messes up the whole situation. Human strength, human timing will not work. Then in chapter 4, verse 24, he takes them back and reminds them why. It's an allegory, as he kind of presents this. And he says, which things are symbolic? Oh, okay, now you're trying to say that this symbolism of Sarah and Hagar, here's the symbolism. These are the two covenants. The one from Mount Sinai, which gives birth to bondage, which is Hagar. Poor Hagar. In innocence, she's involved in this process, thinking she's contributing. Ends up, Sarah gets mad at her, throws her out. She's out wandering in the wilderness, wondering if she's going to die, her child's going to die. God provides, takes care of her, as he always does. But it's the allegory of Mount Sinai. Hagar's Mount Sinai, Arabia, corresponds to Jerusalem, which now is in bondage with her children. But the Jerusalem above is free, which is the mother of us all. For it is written, rejoice, O barren, you who do not bear, break forth and shout, you who are not in labor, for the desolate has more children than she who has a husband. What? You can have children without a husband? Ask Mary. You can have a baby when you're 100 years old, 90 years old? Ask God. This whole scenario with Abraham and Sarah was about it. See, when we do things, it results in separation. We do things our own way, because that's what happened to Hagar and Ishmael. Banned from the family. When they were told to do this by the ones who were trying to work things out. This is why in the middle of this wonderful book, Paul reminds them, I'm going to show you a story, an activity, an occurrence in the past where when Abraham tried to do things for God, he fouled up. And he got in the way, and he made things worse. Now we thought Abraham is the father of the faithful, right? When he's told to leave and go, he leaves and he goes. When he's told to sacrifice his son, he sacrifices his son. But prior to that moment in time, in the interim, when he's waiting for that son, for the son of promise, for God to move in the way he told him he was going to move, and for him to fully trust God. One of our greatest struggles, folks, and I'm in the middle of it at times, is letting God be God. And trusting that he knows what's best for us, regardless of the choices I make or the path I go or the things I choose to do. I'm becoming startlingly more aware that it really doesn't matter if I'm here or not, or if I'm anywhere or not. God's going to get his work done. It's not about me. It wasn't about Abraham. It wasn't about Sarah. It's impressive when a 90-year-old woman has a baby. Can you imagine the Jerusalem news? Today, at CMC Jerusalem, there's been a baby born to a 90-year-old lady. Her 100-year-old husband leaning nearby. That's God. When are we going to get to the point? When are we going to fully get to see it results in slavery and bondage? When we try to figure it out on our own. When we try to make sure we go, now here we're not going to the practical thing, and some of you are going to get this, some of you aren't. We're not going to go the practical way of if I attend enough worship services, if I help enough people, if I read my Bible enough. You're not. Now, in that same vein, just like I mentioned last week, should I want to do all of those things? Absolutely. And if I don't want to do those, then there's an issue, there's a problem with my spirit. But it doesn't matter how many right things I do. It doesn't matter how many right places I go. It doesn't matter how many right choices I make. God is the one who is going to do for me what He's made a promise of. If I trust Him, if it is my faith that moves me. The application of that is in verse 28 through 31, where it's already been read, but look back there. Galatians chapter 4, rather. Thought I had it marked. Now we, brethren, as Isaac was, are children of promise. But as he who was born according to the flesh then persecuted him who was born according to the Spirit, even so it is now. There are always individuals telling us, but you need to do it this way. They may tell you, you need to do it this way in a religious sense, in the way that the things that you practice. Only God has the right to determine what we do in worship to Him, in our work for Him. It is God's base determination. His word has to be the source of that, and we have to trust God in doing that. When we don't do that, you see, we're either children of the free or we're the children of the slave. And that's the point that he makes. Which one have I chosen as my mother? With all the best of intentions, Sarah made the suggestion to Abraham because she thought she was helping. How many times in our lives have we, with the best of intentions, made a choice to help God? But it's not been in line with what He wants. There's so many examples throughout the Bible of individuals with the best of intentions, and the results in some cases were horrific. And we don't understand them. One of the classic ones is poor Uzzah, all right? Here's Uzzah on a journey with the Ark of the Covenant. He had the forethought. He's transporting it from one place to another. And he's got at his disposal a brand new cart. I would imagine there is no depiction at all in Scripture of what all it says is there's a new cart. I would imagine it's got bright, shiny wheels. Nothing had ever touched it. It was in pristine condition. I mean, if you're going to transport the Ark of the covenant, the presence of God, the most holy piece of furniture in the entire world, you're going to make sure that you transport it in the best possible way. You're going to give that a great deal of thought. You're going to say, oh my word, we're taking it from here to there. I want to make sure it can't be bumped, it can't be touched, it can't be moved in any way other than the best possible way. So I'm going to put it on this new cart and I'm going to move it. Because that means I'm going to show God, I want to move this for you. The whole time. I don't want to be flippant about this. I want to try to do it. The whole time God's up here scratching his head going, I thought I told him how to move it. What are they doing? I mean, there's 7, 8 verses in the Levitical code about how to move this piece of furniture. And the individuals that can move it. Specified. It was designed for the very purpose of being transported as carefully as possible. Almost, I hope you get this, almost casket-like. You got poles, 2 rings on either side, and you've got individuals on either side carrying it very carefully. How would you carry the Ark of the Covenant of God? They're on the journey, taking it, I'm sure with intent. Everybody's watching it on this new cart. It hits something, starts to fall, with the best of intention. Goes to catch it. Did I mention something about the Levitical code? It was designed to be carried in a particular way so it would not be touched. Uzzah touched the ark and died. And everybody goes, poor Uzzah. He only had best intentions. No, he had his intentions. Now, some of you are going to come to me after and go, that's not fair. I'm just telling you the story. That's in the Bible. Where God says, if I give you some instructions and you choose to do something different, you will learn a lesson from it that sometimes will be more harsh than you can even imagine. Because listen, your mom said, remember the whole thought of this, who is your mother? Can it be? That was one of the phrases. I used to remember going to my dad and asking permission for something, and they were really good at this. What did your mom say? You ever that moment, or when you go to the mom and you ask, what did your dad say? And you're going, well, man, I'm not going to get anywhere here either. They're in cahoots. God says, I'm trying to communicate with you. So your mom is the one who has your best interest in mind based on what I have decided, what I've determined. Got a little blurb there. It says, the children of Hagar, the Ishmaels of this world, they trust in themselves and are lost. And that's the only example he's using here. When I do something my way, whatever it may be in reference to God, how I worship him, what I choose to do, how I decide I'm going to have a relationship with him. There are many individuals in the world, there's several ways you can go to God. No, there's one way you can go to God. That is through his word, within his will, and based on the process that he offered for us. See, the children of Sarah, the Isaacs of the world, they trust God alone for salvation, and they're saved. So who is your mother? You remember over in Genesis 17? Flip over there with me for just a moment. This is when eventually they waited and it occurred the way God had it planned. In Genesis 17, then God said to Abraham, verse 15 is where I'm reading. Genesis 17, verse 15. God said to Abraham, as for Sarai, Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. Why? And I will bless her, and also give you a son by her. Then I will bless her, and she shall be the mother of nations. Kings of people shall be from her. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed, and said in his heart, shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? And shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? And Abraham said to God, oh, that Ishmael might live before you. He's still, Abraham's going, I have a boy. Pointing right at him. God's saying, I can see Ishmael. He's not your son. Please don't misunderstand that. He is. But what God's saying is, he's not the one that I told you you're going to have. Then God said, no, Sarah, your wife shall bear a son. You shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his descendants after him. And as for Ishmael, I heard you. Behold, I have blessed him, will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. He'll beget 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, bear to you at this time next year. Then he finished talking with him, and God went up from Abraham. 16 years. Wow. Whose timeline are you on this morning? Are we trusting in doing things our way, or are we going to trust and do things God's way? Because his way is a way that is when we respond in spiritual, faithful obedience. It's still not about what we do. It's the reason. Because we say, okay, maybe this doesn't make sense to me. Maybe there are a lot of other options out there. But God, if you say this and I do this, then that shows I trust you. I'd have loved to have been there that morning at the Son of Laughter. Tell me God doesn't have a sense of humor. When laughter was born. And it's changed things ever since. This morning, will you trust God? Will you trust God to respond to him in a life of faith? Like Abraham did. The greatest example that we have. See, the cool thing about that is Abraham made mistakes. We're going to make mistakes. But if we continue to trust the way Abraham trusted, eventually that moment occurs when it all makes sense. When Sarah looked down into Isaac's eyes and Abraham looked into Isaac's eyes, this is what God said he was going to do. He'll do that for us if we trust him. Either an initial penitent faith, confession of Jesus as Lord and baptism, or as we rededicate ourselves to the family of God. If we can assist you in any way this morning, will you come as we stand and as we sing?
I hear the Savior say, thy strength indeed is small. Child of weakness, watch and